Hello, listener, and welcome to this preview of our latest Patreon-exclusive episode. To continue the conversation and listen to the full episode, head over to the Beyond the Screenplay Patreon. The link is in the show notes. Hello, patrons, and welcome to this Patreon-exclusive episode of Beyond the Screenplay, the podcast where each episode we do a conversational deep dive analysis into a film. Today, we are talking about Mrs. Doubtfire, the 1993 film written by Randy Mayhem Singer and Leslie Dixon, based on the 1987 novel Madame Doubtfire by Anne Fine, and directed by Chris Columbus. I'm joined by the Beyond the Screenplay team, Trisha Rand.
Hello, everyone.
Brian Bittner.
I'm not going to take this one away from Alex.
And Alex Calleros.
Hello!
It was weird watching this because, like, for some reason, when I always heard her saying that as, like, doo-doo-doo, I didn't know if she was saying a word, but then people were referencing the way she says hello, and it was very strange. Anyway.
The same thing. I was just always like, it was like, woo-hoo, or something.
Right. Yeah. Like, what? There's words there? So we are nearing the end of our Fall Favorites season. Last week, we talked about American Beauty. Next week, we're going to be talking about LA Confidential. It's been quite a ride this season, and we've gone to some interesting places. But we have not yet been to Mrs. Doubtfire. And Alex, you are the reason that we are talking about Mrs. Doubtfire and adding this eclectic entry to this fall season. Tell me about Mrs. Doubtfire.
Well, you're welcome, because it's a delightful movie, and I still love it to this day. It was a movie that I watched a lot growing up. I think it was just kind of one of those, like, family-friendly enough approved comedies that it was oft rented from Blockbuster. When I think of Robin Williams, I think of this movie. I think this movie doesn't exist without Robin Williams. They're just like one and the same. So much of him and his spirit and his comedy and who he is like in this film. It's also the movie that kind of like introduced me to San Francisco as a place and the kind of like magic and love of San Francisco. And so there's a lot of formative things in here for me. And I just, now watching it as an adult, I think the script is so well structured. It's so tight. Every scene has this interesting tension going on because there's always the like, is the disguise gonna not work? Is Daniel gonna slip in his Mrs. Doubtfire character? And so there's these layers of tension on top of just the comedy or the other inherent drama in the scenes. So I'm just constantly kind of entertained and drawn in by this movie from start to finish. And it's really touching, like the way it concludes. It's a really good movie about divorce and about, family separation. And it's just, there's so many things that go right in this movie that maybe a lot of the films we talked about this season, including last week, American Beauty, you can see a lot of ways they could have gone wrong. And I can see Mrs. Doubtfire, a lot went right to make it this really magical, lovely package. And that includes the supporting cast. I mean, all the kids, Sally Field as Miranda, I love her so much. Even Pierce Brosnan as, the early iteration of the real estate king. There's so much good stuff in this movie. So excited to talk about it.
Nice. Yeah, so this was a movie that I also watched a million times, just like on repeat on VHS, to the point where there's like sound effects that are seared into my brain, where like when Mrs. Doubtfire has to order the food and she's spooning the tapioca or whatever it is, there's a little sound like there's something that like I could hear anyway.
That is also why is it that one that's seared in our memories? But I know what you mean,
right? There's 100%. Something about that anyway. So yes.
So welcome to ASMR with Michael Tucker.
Yeah.
I had seen it a ton as a kid and loved it, but I don't think I've probably seen this for like 20 years. Maybe it's been a really long time, and so I had forgotten everything, and then it was one of those experiences where 2 seconds before something happened, I was like, oh, then that happens. And then that happens like for the whole movie. So it was really interesting also looking at it as an adult. This premise is kind of insane. And there's like the idea that you're sort of infiltrating your soon-to-be ex-wife's house and like getting her secret, vulnerable, like beliefs and the things that she's going through from it is like objectively a weird thing. And like that, I don't think as a kid, you don't think about those things. So there was just like the weirdness of the premise was really hitting me. But it was also interesting that this movie is kind of like you were saying, Alex. There's this like genuine sweetness. First of all, from like a male father figure, like that's cool to see this like father that loves his kids like this much. But the subject matter is serious. It's talking about like divorce and complicated like adult relationships that I feel like kids don't have, they have their perspective on, but don't have the access to, of like, this deep relationship and the obstacles that they're going through. And so it's sort of this like adult movie thematically wrapped in a kid's movie in some ways, like structured, like it's really easy to watch. The goals are clear. The objective is clear. So I don't know. It seems unlike any other movie to me in that it felt as much for adults and mature as it was also just absurd, goofy. There's a pie on her face now. Mm-hmm. And so it was just really interesting to realize that
into coffee.
Into coffee, yes. Which as a kid, I was like, that looks delicious. Of course, it's cake and it's an adult. I'm like, no, I don't want to eat that face coffee. So it was a really weird experience for me. Trisha, tell me about Mrs. Doubtfire.
Alex, I am welcome. Thank you. Thank you for bringing this to me. I wasn't allowed to watch this movie when I was a kid because I wasn't allowed to watch any 90s comedies, basically, when we were growing up. My parents were just really strict about what we watched, and for whatever reason, I don't know, we didn't make it to Mrs. Doubtfire. And my mom was visiting recently, and I was like, so I have to watch Mrs. Doubtfire for the podcast. I've never seen it. She's like, you haven't seen it? And I was like, Mother, you are the reason I haven't seen it. Like, she's like, well, I figured you would have watched it by now. I was like, have you seen it? She's like, oh, many times. It's really great. I was like, thank you. So anyway, my mom beat me to Mrs. Doubtfire. But yeah, no, it was a delight. I fell in love with this movie. I watched it like pretty much right after we picked the movies for the season because it was the one I was most excited to see. And I just was smitten from like a couple minutes in. I was like, why is this so great? And it really is the love of Daniel for his kids. Like, it's so intense and real. Like, when he tells the judge, like, I haven't been apart from them for even a few minutes since they were born. Like, I'm just obsessed with them. I love them. And I feel like that's such a unique characterization. And the character of Daniel himself, like, is so understandable. Like, you understand how he would be hard to live with and like might not be the best partner, and the problems with the way that he fathers, at the beginning of the movie. Like, I very much understand that he sets himself up as like the good fun dad, and then like she has to come and be the police officer and like deal with stuff and handle it when it's real, and like it's a really difficult dynamic. So even while you're rooting for them as a family, there are real problems here. And yet it's so easy to love that character too, right? And I guess to your point, Michael, I don't know if I would have accessed any of that as a kid, right? Like, I can't watch it through a kid lens now. And so I'm seeing it as a parent myself and like as a person in my late 30s and feeling a lot of like the adult things that are going on, and also the joy of watching Robin Williams do this. Again, with all the hindsight in the world, knowing exactly his career and everything we know about him. And so, yeah, I think that for me, it paid off really well watching it at this stage in my life. There's no nostalgia here, just appreciation for the work that's actually on the screen. And there's a lot to praise. So I'm excited.
Cool. All right. And Brian, what about you?
I think this is a Pixar movie. I was like, no, we don't make this kind of movie anymore, and not like this premise, but this sort of, as we're talking about this kind of, kids can get it, but adults like are really getting it and stuff like that. And I was like, oh yeah, we are making these movies. They're just animated. Like, Pixar seems to be the only studio making this. I'm sure there are other examples, but yeah, because I was also watched this a bunch as a kid. And had not watched it in a long time. But I definitely know that as a kid or young teenager, I was like fully in tune with everything that it was talking about, even if I didn't really get it from an experiential standpoint, right? Because it's like a 2-hour and 6-minute movie or something. It really takes its time with the character stuff and with the kind of the dramatic side of everything. And I definitely know that as a kid, I was into that. I wasn't just like, oh man, they're talking now. Like, where are the hijinks? I definitely like felt the entirety of this movie. And yeah, just I haven't seen it in quite a while. So revisiting it where I'm like, I know I watched this movie a lot, but like, did I just forget a bunch? Or maybe I only watched it like 10 times and not 50 times, I guess, a kid, so I'm not like, I don't remember exactly where everything is falling. And yeah, it's just really fun, plays with the premise in some really fun ways. But like I said, takes time with the characters, just has a whole lot of heart. Robin Williams is going to do a pained smile monologue, and you're just going to be like, well, I don't know what else I want from a movie. And yeah, very, very interesting to look at it from, sort of analytical perspective while also being able to just watch it again for quite a while and just enjoy the hell out of it.
Hope you enjoyed this preview clip. To continue the conversation and listen to the entire episode, head over to the Beyond the Screenplay Patreon. The link is in the show notes.